begin with an update on Hurricane Helene. The death toll is now above 200. Resources are beginning to arrive. The federal government seems frozen, but lots of people like Team Recon is on the ground. Team Rubicon, excuse me. I've tweeted out Team Rubicon's URL. Salvation Army has opened up a big operation there. Samaritan's Purse is obviously working there. My local affiliate, 92.9 Super Talk, is, if you're listening on Super Talk right now, we are partnered down there with Food City. Just go by Food City and make a donation. But if you're not in the area where the catastrophe is hit, go to Team Rubicon, go to the Salvation Army, go to Samaritan's Purse. I know they're there. I know they're working. They're doing their best. Don't fall for people on the internet telling you crazy stuff. Just go to the people that get the job done and have a track record. Donald Trump was asked by Bill Melugin on Fox yesterday about the federal response, which has just been terrible. Cut number 45.
We're up to more than 200 people dead from Hurricane Helene. I'm sure you saw yesterday, DHS says FEMA doesn't have enough money to last hurricane season. What's your reaction to hearing that?
Well, they're doing a very bad job. They've given over $1 billion to illegal migrants that came in, and now they have no money for North Carolina, for Georgia, for South Carolina, and Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida. I think that's a disgrace. This is a country that's being run by fools.
Now, Senator Vance was in Virginia with Governor Youngkin in the southwest corner, which has also been hit, like eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, northern Georgia, a little bit of Florida. Here's Senator Vance, cut number 48.
I know that, we're, of course, in the middle of a political campaign. I think that one thing I've heard consistently from the governor is that FEMA has provided a lot of resources, and of course we're very grateful to that. But I also think that talking to people just on the ground today, but also talking to the governor, this is a community that has long been left behind by the leadership of this country. People who have been forgotten, people who have been ignored, people who have been judged despite the fact that they are the nicest people in the world. I gave the mayor a hug, and I was talking to somebody else along with the mayor, and she said, we're hillbillies and we're proud of it. And I think this community shows you why people are proud of Appalachian values. They're resilient, they're strong, they love their neighbors, and they're going to rebuild this community, I believe, better than what it was before. And that's because of their incredible resilience and the incredible grace of the community of Damascus.
You got to remember, J.D. Vance is a child of Appalachia. Very much. Spent every summer in Appalachia with Mama, and that story, Hillbilly Elegy, is what propelled him on the national scene. He knows of which he speaks. So please be generous. Team Rubicon, Salvation Army, Samaritan's Purse. And if you're in the Tri-City area, go over to Food City, and they'll take your donations there. 92.9 Super Talk working with us there. Also in Israel last night, another massive hit on another Hezbollah facility. It is believed that the entire Shura Council of Hezbollah was destroyed last night as they met in their intel center. It seems to me there's no other conclusion that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has been penetrated by the Israeli intelligence operation and that they know everything Hezbollah is doing. It is not without blood and tears for Israel. Soldiers are dying, but Hezbollah commandos are exhausted, falling back, disorganized, no command and control. And the United States continues to try and dictate to Israel the terms on which it will respond. That is shameful, absolutely shameful. Now, to the monologue. And if you haven't seen the movie Snatch, one of my very favorite movies, don't listen to this, there's a spoiler. For those of you who have seen the movie, the role of Bricktop in the past two debates by CBS and ABC, the role of Bricktop is played by not Governor Walz, but by CBS and ABC. The governor is playing the roles of everyone who fought Mickey in that movie, and J.D. Vance obviously gets the Mickey role. Now, I just finished yesterday with a 9-mile walk. I wasn't trundling yesterday, I was just walking along briskly, but I had 2 days of post-debate podcast. I listened to the Ruthless podcast with Josh Holmes and Comfortably Smug and John Ashbrook and the voice Michael Duncan. I listened to Megyn Kelly yesterday, talking with Matt Walsh and Michael Moynihan. I listened to Mary Catherine Hammer and Vic Mattis on Getting Hammered. Rich Lowry was on the editors with Jim Garrity and Dominic Pino and Michael Brennan Doherty. Then Rich went on and spoke with Andrew McCarthy for the McCarthy Report. They were all doing the debate. And, of course, there were two immediate post-debate pods. Commentary did an emergency pod. John Podhoretz, Abe Greenwald, Christine Rosen, Matt Continetti, Seth Mandel. And Dwayne's World, radio blogger, stayed up after the debate, did one. That's a total of 20 very smart people, 7 podcasts. It's about 14 hours of listening. This is show prep for me. All of these people have been watching legacy media for a long time. They're very open-eyed about the bias. They're used to it. We're usually unfazed by it. We'll point it out, but we're usually unfazed by it. But our unanimous verdict, I'm person 21. My podcast on this is out there as well at Highly Concentrated Hugh. Our unanimous verdict is that CBS, like ABC, failed in stunning fashion, and not just the moderators, right? The entire networks are involved. I've told you I've done so many of these, as has Megyn Kelly, has Mary Catherine Ham. We know that they are highly produced affairs with a script. We know that everyone from the senior executives down to the interns, teams of 30, 40, 50 people are involved with every debate for days and weeks. They are researched, in quotes, air quotes. They are fact-checked, and their responses are rehearsed, and people play J.D. Waltz, and people play J.D. Vance and Tim Waltz. People do that. And now we know how deeply broken these networks are. And it's not just them. Maybe the winner. Maybe. Remember what cousin Avi, when he comes back? Play that for us, Adam.
Anything to declare?
Yeah, don't go to England.
Okay, maybe NBC and Fox News are going to declare, good thing we didn't get a debate. Because I really do not know. Fox News, if they had done it with Martha and Brett, could have overcome the deeply embedded bias in broadcast journalism. CNN got through it, but they were just stunned. Joe Biden shambled onto the stage, and I just think Jake Tapper and Dana Bash realized they couldn't even breathe hard or he might fall over. And so they didn't really do a debate. Donald Trump just said, nobody knows what you're talking about. And it was just, he destroyed his own career. But that wasn't the moderators. There wasn't a chance to be unfair. Dana did not distinguish herself in her one-on-one interview with Kamala. Here's the deal. We all know how bad it was. We all know every question was set up. I mean, they turned from Hurricane Helene. People are dying. There are 200 people dead. Could go as high as 500. People's lives are ruined, and they turn to climate change because it's on their agenda. They go to abortion as the second question in the ABC debate. It's just, again, the guns, everything, cutting off J.D. Vance's mic when he was educating Margaret Brennan on the fact she did not know what she was talking about temporary protected status. Doesn't mean they're legal immigrants. It means they have temporary protected status, which is invented by the Biden administration. She was getting tutored by J.D. Vance, and that's why they cut off the mic, because she was being embarrassed. Now, the spoiler from Snatch. ABC and CBS thought that the fix was in. They really did. They thought they could run this to destroy Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, and it didn't work. Just like Bricktop thought that he'd fix the fight twice, not once, but twice. Legacy media thought they could fix that match too. But they were wrong, and now they have suffered brand damage. I mean, incredible brand damage. Everybody knows. Some people might pretend at the networks that they didn't embarrass themselves, did not reveal themselves to be hardcore partisans, but they did. Bud Light level damage. That's all I got to say. Picked up the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt, went out to dinner with my brother-in-law and sister-in-law to thank them for putting up with us all summer as we get ready to leave. And we're gonna gather the gang. I think a week from Sunday to say farewell, get them over and feed them. But we were talking at dinner, and we were going down beer choices, and the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt, the waitress said, we got Bud Light. And so everyone at the table said, no. And it's sort of like, not only is it bad beer, but it's a bad brand. That's CBS News, ABC News. That's This Week with George. That's Face the Nation with Margaret. It is just a disaster for mainstream media. And there is no Boris the Blade left standing among legacy media. If you spend the time I did, and I put this all over on X, my X account, the 7 post-debate podcasts, broadcast network executives should oblige everyone on the teams to sit down and listen to all 7 of these. They're center-right to libertarian. Most of them are PG or PG-13. A couple of them are R-rated, but they know of which they speak. They're political pros, ruthless political pros. Megyn Kelly, big name, done debates. Mary Catherine Ham has done debates. The people at Commentary, the smartest people in the world. Go and just make yourself do it. It's an after-action report. You failed. You failed the American public miserably, and they all think you are biased beyond belief. You're propping up a liar in Tim Walz and a completely skillless Kamala Harris. Some of you are not having a good week, especially in North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, West Virginia, parts of Florida, Virginia. God's blessings on you, and people are there to help. Team Rubicon, Salvation Army, Samaritan's Purse. Lots of people taking care of you and donating, and we understand the situation you're in. Last night in Pennsylvania, they had a senatorial debate. Dave McCormick crushed incumbent Senator Bob Casey, who should be sent home. The least recognizable man in Washington. I mean, really don't know what Bob Casey does. Here's Dave McCormick talking about fracking and Bob Casey, cut number 52.
The filibuster, regardless of the party in the majority. Imagine a world where Kamala Harris and Bob Casey is in the majority in the Senate. You heard her speak. She wants to ban fracking. She wants to have mandatory buybacks of your guns. She wants to give citizenship to illegal immigrants. Bob Casey's a sure vote. He is a 99% vote for Biden-Harris. He'll be a 99% vote for Harris-Walz. That is what you're dealing with, a career politician who is too weak and too liberal to stand up against his own party. And so that's why I would vote against it. We shouldn't have extremes on either side. The Senate was meant to be the place where you would
cool whatever hot was going on in the country. Cut number 53, more Dave McCormick, future Pennsylvania senator.
Of the weakness of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and Bob Casey supported them every step of the way. What chutzpah to run an ad on how tough he is on the border when he voted against funding for the Border Patrol. He ran an ad in front of the wall that he voted against. He voted for sanctuary cities. He voted for federal benefits for illegal immigrants. And the fentanyl crisis that's come across our border is the direct result of the weakness of Bob Casey not standing up to these terrible cartels. So this man has very little that he can say with credibility on the border. We have an enormous crisis. We learned just recently that 25,000 convicted murderers and rapists have come across the border. Absolutely, we need to send them home. We need to deport first and foremost those convicted criminals. We have hundreds of people that are on a terrorist watch list. We have made Americans less secure. We've made our country less secure. We've made Pennsylvania less secure because of the weakness of Bob Casey and the Democrats on this issue. I will be strong on this issue on day one.
Dave McCormick is going to win that race. 82nd Airborne, West Point. He is a fabulous candidate. He is well prepared. He is very smart. Now, one more cut from Dave McCormick talking about inflation, because we're going to start to see it at the gas tank. West Texas crude up to 74, Brent crude up to 78. I'll do the market report from AmericanFederal.com in just a second. One more Bob Casey on inflation, though, cut 54.
When you're spent your entire life in public service, elected office, 30 years, you're like a hammer looking for a nail. The cause of inflation is the policies, the out-of-control spending of Biden, Harris, and Casey. Bob Casey voted 100% of the time for that $5 trillion of new spending. The experts at the time, Larry Summers, the San Francisco Fed, said this would create inflation. This has been tried in America.
And then Dave McCormick, cut number 55.
But listen, Senator Casey stood next to Joe Biden when he could hardly finish a sentence. We saw this on the debate stage and said, he's ready to go. Then Senator Casey said, Kamala Harris is great. You're going to love her when you get to know her. This is a woman who in the last few years said she wanted to ban fracking, legalize illegal immigration, give them federal benefits, take away our guns, defund the police. This is her position. So she's flip-flopped on everything, and Bob Casey's standing there by her, and he will be a sure vote. He is a career politician. He has shown weakness when we need strength. He's a 99% vote for his party. He's talking about my independence. He's shown no independence, and he's adopted a set of extreme liberal policies that are truly taking our country in the right direction. So he and I agree. This is a big contrast between the two of us, a political outsider, a West Point graduate, and a businessman.
Thank you, Mr.
One more cut number 56, Dave McCormick.
Senator Casey keeps coming back to my record because he can't defend his own. He can't defend his own on China. He's been in the Senate for 18 years. Ask yourself, where's his legislation get tough on China? Oh, it just came up a couple months ago. That's what happened. My mom's from Punxsutawney. Punxsutawney Bob pops his head out every 6 years and tries to act like he's doing things. This activity, it's all activity. He said on the LNG export ban that President Biden put in place, you know what he did to stop that? He sent a stern letter That's what we have in this senator. A guy who
Dave
keeps his head
McCormick
down.
just killed him.
pops it
Send
up.
some relief factor to Bob Casey because he's got aches and pains today. As many of you know, I have an affiliate in Portland, WGAN, 98.5 News Talk, and it's 5:60 a.m. And on the weekends, they got a terrific conservative host by the name of Aaron Chadbourne. And so Aaron reached out to me after the season was over, said, come on down. I went down on Saturday. We had a great time. Flew through an hour, very funny couple of stories about that hour. But I wanted to introduce Aaron to you because, A, you should listen to his show on the weekend. If you're going to buy a home in Portland, you should buy a home from him. That's what he is. He's a Harvard man, Harvard Law School, Harvard Business School, and now he's a residential real estate expert in the booming Portland and South Portland market over at Demetria Realty. But I wanted Aaron to come on to explain what is the schizophrenic politics of Maine. Good morning, Aaron. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for getting up. I just told you last Saturday that when I sat down with you, you're about the age I was when I began in radio at KFI AM 640 in Los Angeles in 1990. Do you think you'll still be doing this in 30 years or 35 years or 40 years, Aaron?
You know, Hugh, I grew up on talk radio. I think it is such an important medium. I think it's such an important outlet out there because there are so many people who have been tricked into thinking that they're alone, the silent majority. It's uncomfortable sometimes to speak up for conservative values because the legacy media has convinced you that you're in the minority, that you're a radical, that you're whatever terrible word they can come up with. So I think talk radio is always going to have a place. I think it'll continue to evolve. I think it's one of the reasons we need to protect and defend AM radio. I hope the US Congress does that. But I'll stay involved as long as I can because it's a great way to engage with common sense Americans and common sense Mainers here in the state of Maine to make sure that they're on the right side and they know why they believe what they do. And it's okay to disagree. I'm sure, Hugh, you and I probably don't agree on everything, but it's important to model for citizens of our country that you can have an educated conversation about policy disagreements and how it impacts your life.
Now, Aaron and I were on the air, and he was interviewing me, and I was kind of interviewing him. And I said, I love Susan Collins. After Rob Portman retired, she's probably got the record I would be closest to in terms of governing. And I also like Angus King. I have known the governor, now Senator King, for a long time because he's very good friends with my brother-in-law and has been since they went to school together in Virginia a gazillion years ago. And the nominee from the Republicans called us up, Aaron. That kind of puts you in a bad spot. Sorry about that.
My text messages have been blowing up since you lavished praise on Angus King, Hugh, partially because Angus King has endorsed Kamala Harris. Angus King said that Joe Biden was the most fit president of all time and was championing his reelection right until the point that they pulled the plug on. So I think Angus King, for a lot of people, when he was governor, he left the state in a really tough financial position. But Angus King, you know, he is a Democrat, claims to be an independent. A lot of Republicans aren't thrilled with him, but he's a very popular person. He was well liked when he was governor. He's got universal name ID, and he's going to sail to reelection. But what's really important about that candidate, Demi Kazunas, who's running against Angus King, is that she's willing to show up. She knows that anytime you let a candidate go unchallenged for reelection, the people suffer because the issues that are important to them don't get raised. And I think she's doing a great job with voter turnout and with holding Angus King accountable on issues that he might never have to answer for.
Yeah, to explain the whole, I just said a nice thing about Angus. I mean, it really upset people who are upset. I don't know how you don't like Angus. You get along with him very well, but of course you vote for the Republican.
I have a great personal relationship with Senator King. I think he's, represented Maine on the national stage, but I think his policies are quite extreme.
He votes with the Dems, absolutely. Aaron, I wanted you to explain that there are two Maines. I took a trip down the Kennebec River. Came down and did that 2 weeks ago. And I realized that as soon as you cross the Kennebec, you're in Maine's 2nd congressional district. And south of it, you're in crunchy, green, ultra-liberal Portland and suburbs, Maine. What happened here? Why is Portland so crunchy? And north of the Kennebec, you can't drive a minute without seeing a Trump sign.
Part of it is just in-migration patterns from other blue states that have discovered the great lifestyle that we have here in Maine that have moved into southern Maine. If you look at the voter registration breakdown in Maine, I think Maine now is about 36% Democrat, 30% Republican. The other 33% are independents of some sort or not enrolled in a party. And so we've got a pretty diverse mix across the political spectrum. I think most Mainers, though, really Well, traditional Mainers appreciate their freedoms, their liberty. They really like taking care of the environment around us because we've had a natural resources based economy. But as you know, Hugh, we've seen a migration away from the natural resources based economy with a lot of manufacturing. We've had unfair trade practices in Canada, in our forest industry, in our fishing. And so there are a lot of people who feel left behind. And the government in the state of Maine for a very long time had one of the most generous welfare programs in the country. My former boss, Paul LePage, of course, worked with the Maine legislature to reform that, although his successor, Janet Mills, who served as Attorney General at the same time as Vice President Harris, she took steps to undo all of the reforms that he put in place, which is why it's so important that you have divided government so that people are forced to partner. One party rule, we see it run amok here in Maine, you see it run amok in Massachusetts, you see the damage that it can do. So I think there are two Maines, though. Well, the interesting story about it, though, is that Maine still has two different congressional districts that behave very differently. The first district is southern Maine and the coast. The second district is northern and western Maine. They vote very differently. And so we have the opportunity to send two different parties to Congress if Austin Terrio is successful in defeating incumbent Jared Golden. Donald Trump, of course, won Maine's second congressional district in both of his elections. Maine's somewhat unique that we can split our electoral votes. Maine only has 4. 2 get awarded to the statewide winner and 1 each for each congressional district. Donald Trump, first person in history to win one of Maine's electoral votes, split it off, and he did it in both elections. He beat Hillary Clinton by 10 points in the second district. He beat Joe Biden by 7 points. So in a Trump plus 7 district, we have a Democrat incumbent, and I think the candidate that's running against him, Austin Terrio, is probably the best positioned to beat Jared Golden that we've seen in his 6 years.
I watched some of the Austin Terrio debate, Aaron. He's going to win, and Jared Golden's going to run for governor because your current governor is falling apart. Now, I want to talk about conservative media. We saw a very deeply biased debate by CBS and one by ABC. I mean, so bad, I couldn't believe it. Portland is kind of in a news hole except for WGAN. We got Grace Curley, we got Howie, we got you on the weekends. And we got the Maine Wire, which is replacing a lot of subscriptions as we speak. Is there any chance of changing Maine media? I don't know what local TV is because I don't get local TV. I'm a Roku guy, so I don't watch the local Maine station. Is there any fairness in Maine at all that's not on WGAN?
The only fairness that's not on conservative talk radio, Hugh, that you'll hear is from the Maine Wire. And I want to give a major shout out to Steve Robinson and his team at the Maine Wire, who's showing that there is room for real reporting. They're the only outlet that's covering the purchasing of rural homes by the Chinese drug mafia that's converting them into these illegal grow houses, hurting our housing market, and also poisoning Mainers. It's illicit crime activity that funds other illicit activities by the Chinese mafia. So you're not hearing that story reported. You're not hearing the governor speak about it. Susan Collins and federal authorities have been leaders on this issue, but now the Maine Wire is able to kind of break national stories. They're also able to hold our press accountable. We had an amazing thing happen, Hugh, where our newspapers were bought up by a Soros-funded nonprofit. They're now all controlled by the Maine Trust for Local News. So there's no diversity of perspective in the newspapers. And our poor television reporters, a lot of them rely on the newspapers to do a lot of the groundwork and the reporting. So there's not diversity of thought, but there's also not fair reporting. And I think what we saw in the vice presidential debate, it was really another 301. And kudos for JD Vance. That's what people need to see. They need to see someone who's not afraid to stand up when it's unfair, to call out the moderators when they're just becoming debaters themselves. My former boss, Paul LePage, had a great way of doing that. He could command media attention, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, but he was able to cut through the noise. It takes leadership like that, but it also takes entrepreneurship. And I think the Maine Wire is showing it would be a great model for the nation of how a center-right or even just a neutral party can uncover a lot of the news that goes unreported about the
there's New Hampshire Journal. My friend Michael runs that. The Maine Wire is great. But I was so happy to hear a Saturday host, a weekend host, whose real job is Demetria Realty. But I want people to follow Aaron Chadbourne. You know, you can find him on X. I just put him in my post over at X. And keep doing what you're doing, Aaron. I'll see you next year when I come back again. And press on, my friend. It's great to make your acquaintance.
We're going to miss you in Maine, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
I'll be back. I'll be back. It's now my second home. It's home away from home is now in Maine. I've become kind of a Mainer. Not really. I can't speak the Yankee, but I'm learning. I'm learning. I've been waiting to talk to Stephen Patterson since the vice presidential debate brought up the housing market. Stephen, good morning. Let me do my mandatory disclosures. I am an investor in Key City Capital, right? KeyCityCapital.com/Hugh. So I'm an investor in a fund that you cannot invest in anymore because it closed years ago. And the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I are very happy about that. Key City Capital is also a sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show. And I must tell you, before you invest, A, you've got to be an accredited investor, and B, read the prospectus. Now, Stephen, with my disclosures done, I can ask you, what did you make of the vice presidential debate on housing in the rental market?
Yeah, no, I think that there's a deep divide between the two sides, right? And the reality of it is that $25,000 credits from the federal government for first-time home buyers is going to do one thing, and that's going to be to raise the price of every home $25,000. It adds to inflation, it adds to unaffordability, and it's just not a realistic approach to solving a serious problem.
So I just thought there also evidence Democrats have a complete ignorance about how housing units come to market. The federal government doesn't build anything. People like Key City Capital either build or buy rental units. The government doesn't do that. Are you surprised every time you hear Kamala Harris or Tim Walz talk about 3 million new housing units? They don't do that.
No, and it goes back to Ronald Reagan, right? The scariest words in the English language. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. If you look at any of these types of policies that have gone on, whether it's rent control that we see all along the eastern seaboard, the reality of it is that it makes housing less affordable. Whereas being able to invest with a group of entrepreneurs like ourselves that go out, source housing, create good situations for tenants, and return a profit to clients is truly a path forward in America. It's capitalism at its finest, where everyone can win. And it's not a government decision picking winners and losers with an unrealistic view of the role that government can play.
So what I want the audience to know, Key City Capital does one thing. They aggregate investors' money into a fund that acquires existing or builds new rental units. Tell me something, Stephen. I have never wanted to own a rental unit because of maintenance, et cetera. Did any of your units get hammered by Helene?
No, we actually didn't. We were affected 2 years ago with the hurricane in Florida, but this time through we did not. And our heart certainly goes out to those affected, because it is tragic and it is devastating when you come home to a home that is in shambles.
Moreover, I just want people to understand what happens in a rental market when a disaster like this happens. There aren't suddenly new places to live. They've got to either move out of state or find an apartment somewhere. Do you always see that in the aftermath of disaster, rental rates going up?
It can, especially where there's been mass devastation, where there is a significant reduction in housing. And, I think that the prudent thing is to certainly be respectful of that time. But I think that, over the long haul, looking at those areas that have been so devastated, housing shortages cause real issues for families, and costs are one of those issues that starts happening.
And what we really need is investment in the private sector in housing. That's what Key City Capital does. That's why I chose it. But I also don't want to do, I really don't want to do any maintenance because, my goodness, Stephen, I don't know who runs your maintenance operations for all of the properties that Key City Capital owns, but they must have patience of Job for, I think most of your funds are right now in Texas, are they not?
No, we focus in really four states: Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Alabama. Now we're in some other southern states, but those four where the bulk of the portfolios are held. And yeah, I mean that's over 100 people that help us take care of properties. You know, Hugh, as an investor, told me one time. He said, "I don't want to answer the phone at 2 a.m. To hear about a leaky faucet or a toilet that doesn't flush." And that's where we come
And
in
that,
and allow our investors a completely passive role.
and achieve some depreciation and tax advantage. I never mention that because I forget, but maybe we'll talk about that next week. Come back next week, Stephen Patterson, because we'll get some additional economic news, and I'll talk to you about what the tax advantage of Key City Capital is. KeyCityCapital.com/Hugh, great sponsor, and I'm an investor, but I got to remind you, you can't get into my fund because I invested 2 calendar years ago. It closed long ago. And the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I are very happy, but you can't get into that when you have to look at their new fund. Get the prospectus, read it. You got to be an accredited investor. I want to thank Adam. I want to thank Carly. I want to thank Generalissimo for all that they do. And we are a month away from the election. It is tight as a tick. All the swing states are margin of error. And in the key Senate race in Ohio, Bernie Moreno and Sherrod Brown are in a statistical tie. Bernie Moreno, welcome back. It is great to see you. I reviewed all the polling data. I don't know what your internal show, but it does show it's an absolutely tied race. So we're on in Youngstown, Warren, Toledo, Columbus, Cleveland, Akron. We're down in Cincinnati, Hamilton, Dayton. You tell those people why they need to get out and work for you.
It's a very simple answer, Hugh, and thank you for having me on. Look, the Senate majority determines on whether I win or lose. President Trump's going to win by 8 to 12 points. If you like President Trump, you want to see his policies enacted, you have to vote for Bernie Moreno for the United States Senate because it's the clearest path for us to get the Republican majority. Heaven forbid Chuck Schumer is the majority leader while President Trump is back in office. What are they going to do? They'll impeach him again. They won't let him appoint his cabinet. They won't let him appoint judges. So it's critical that we regain the Senate majority. It runs through voting for me, Bernie Moreno, the United States Senate.
Now, I no longer know the rules in Ohio, Bernie Moreno. Can people vote early? Are they absentee heavy, or is it day of voting exclusively or overwhelmingly?
Well, the first thing you should know about Ohio is we run really good elections. They're safe, they're secure. We make it hard to cheat and easy to vote. So on Monday, October 7th, this coming Monday, is the last day to register to vote. And then you can vote starting Tuesday, October 8th. We have 4 weeks of early voting. And I'm asking all my supporters, please go vote early. Make sure you vote on October 8th or soon thereafter. And I say, Hugh, vote 11 times. And what that means is vote yourself and then bring 10 people with you to early voting. If on election night, 32 days from right now, if on election night Sherrod Brown is not above 55% on absentee ballots, this race is over. We won the Senate race, and we can have this race called by 8 o'clock Eastern time.
Now, Bernie Moreno, I like to tell people, Sherrod Brown and I are the same age. He might be a year older. He got out of Yale. I got out of Harvard. I worked for the government for 5 years with Ronald Reagan. I haven't worked for the government since. Sherrod Brown has never not worked for the government. He immediately went into politics. He's been in politics for 50 years. He's never made a dollar in his life or employed anyone in his life. Do people of Ohio realize he's just a swamp creature?
Well, he's done a great job with the help of the Ohio media to convince people that he's a moderate, that he's bipartisan. They don't really know his background story, which is remarkable considering, as you said, how long he's been there. And here's the other thing they don't know, Hugh. He at Yale, he was his studies was Russian studies. That was his major. This is a guy who wanted to learn about how communism works, which is no surprise given how he governs. So look, people are sick and tired of these swamp creatures. They're sick and tired of these career politicians. That's why we're going to win this race on November 5th, because they need a change. Look, Washington, D.C. is fundamentally broken. You need outsiders. You need business people to help fix it.
Now, Bernie Moreno was one of the 6 Senate candidates on the stage when I moderated a debate in 2022 in Columbus. And he had sparkle. I really thought he had sparkle. I thought, oh, this is a very talented field. Then Bernie stepped aside to wait for this year. JD won. Of course, he was on the debate stage on Tuesday night. How'd you like your former debating partner and now future colleague, J.D. Vance? Whether he's president of the Senate or back in the Senate, how'd you think he did?
He absolutely scored a home run. I mean, it's so much so that the entire media won't talk about the debate any longer. I mean, JD showed what the America First agenda is all about. He showed incredible poise. He answered the questions succinctly and really well. And look, it was an incredible testament to President Trump. The most important part of selecting a vice president is the decision making of the commander in chief. And President Trump made a brilliant pick in selecting JD Vance. On the other side, you look at Kamala Harris' decision making. She could have picked a lot better people than Tim Walz. He came across nervous. He didn't know what he was talking about, didn't have command of the facts. Now, of course, he also had a pretty tough job. He has to defend the last 3.5 years of the Biden-Harris administration. But overall, JD scored a 10 out of 10. There's no doubt.
I think he may have actually made a difference in some of the swing states, and vice presidents normally don't. Bernie Moreno's website is berniemoreno.com. The left's dark money morass is flooding the Buckeye State with left-wing dollars to try and pretend Sherrod Brown's a moderate. You got to help out Bernie. Small donations are valued heavily. berniemoreno.com. I'll come back to that in a moment, to the money. I want to turn to immigration for a second. Everyone knows about Springfield. But when Senator Vance attempted to explain that while the residents of Springfield have been overwhelmed by temporary protected status Haitians, they are not racist, they are not angry, they're just overwhelmed. TPS is not legal immigration. I mean, did you jump out of your chair when Margaret Brennan cut off J.D. Vance, who is going to explain the situation in Springfield?
Oh, absolutely, Hugh. It's infuriating. As you know, I'm a legal immigrant to this country. We have a line. We have to have people come here legally the right way. We're rewarding bad behavior. Look, the situation in Springfield is a total and complete disaster. We are actually flying people here on charter planes, on private jets. We're flying people to be dependent on our social safety net. The story about Springfield is even more interesting, Hugh, because there aren't new jobs there. So where are the 20,000 people doing? They're dependent on welfare, on Social Security, on food stamps. Those are programs designed for American citizens. And by the way, Hugh, we have a lot of American citizens that are suffering, that need those programs. Let's make sure we absolutely restore those programs only for Americans. And the idea that the media just won't even talk about it, or misinforms, or directs, or interrupts whenever we talk about this, it just shows you where the media is just completely broken right now.
Now, berniemoreno.com, before I come to the money. Bernie, the Guardians are in the American League Division Series against the Tigers. The Royals are playing the Yankees. Nobody had that bracket. How hard is it to campaign when the Browns are 1-3? And you're talking neo people here. We're both from the land. How hard is it to talk to people about politics when the Guardians are playing playoff baseball and the Browns are diving into the bottom?
You know what? The Browns are going to get their act together. I'm actually pretty optimistic that they'll turn the season around and we'll be in good shape. I think the Indians will absolutely destroy the Tigers, as they should, by the way.
You just did what I do. I sometimes say Indians, but I try and say Guardians.
That makes one of us. Look, they're going to do really well. Ohio State's having a great season. Ohio is really a place where we love our sports. We're passionate people here. We're passionate about politics, and we're passionate about this country. And fundamentally, that's what this election is about, Hugh. You got to love this country.
Now, talk to me about the money. Talk to me about the money, because I have seen the dark money flowing into my home state, and I am astonished.
Hugh, listen to this number. Sherrod Brown raised almost $31 million last quarter. This is a guy who's got every special interest group, every Hollywood celebrity, every San Francisco liberal, every Wall Street elite that is backing his campaign. $31 million in hard money in one quarter. It's an outrageous sum of money. We got to compete. We need the people to step up and help fund this campaign. I need all the help I can get. You can do that on my website, berniemoreno.com. It's imperative that we have the resources to expose him as the far left liberal that supported Kamala Harris almost 100% of the time, even though he's trying to deny that, Hugh. Right now, he's doing commercials where he's moderate, he's bipartisan, he supported President Trump. We got to have the money and resources to combat those commercials, show they're just lies. This is a guy who stabbed President Trump in the back at every turn.
Now, if you're in Ohio, and I cover the state, and I know I have a great audience there in Cleveland, Columbus, etc., go and register. You can register through close of business at the voting registrar office by October 7th, Monday. And then you can vote early. And as Bernie Moreno just said, vote 11 times. That means vote yourself and bring 10 people with you. Bernie, you must be working around the clock. I'll give you the last minute. What's it like in the last 30 years? You're just starting your finishing kick.
Well, look, Hugh, I love campaigning. You meet incredible people in every corner of the state. We have amazing citizens here in Ohio. They just want leadership that cares about them. They want people in Washington, D.C. that put their interest above all else, that advocate for them. Look, we have flooding down in southeastern Ohio. They can't get federal help, and yet we send billions of dollars overseas. We spend billions on foreign nationals here in this country. They just want leadership that does what their sworn duty is, which is to defend and protect America. That's it. And I love it. We're going to do it hard for the next 32 days. We're going to go to every corner of the state. We'll be back in Youngstown with Senator Tim Scott. We're really excited about that. We're going to have President Trump here soon. So we're going to close this campaign really strong.
Thank you, Bernie. Keep coming back. I hope you'll even go to Howland. But you're going to have to speak very slowly when you're in Howland. Very slowly. Those people are very slow. They're like the Steelers fans. But thank you, Bernie Moreno. Go to BernieMoreno.com. I posted it over at X. Make sure you support him. And if you know anybody in Ohio, we need that seat to turn America around. 50 years. Sherrod Brown needs to go get a real job. 50 years. He's been in the state Senate, the state Assembly, Congress, Senate. Make him get a real job. Send Bernie. He's been in the private sector the whole time since he became an illegal immigrant. Bernie Moreno for Senate. Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Good morning, Hugh. Before I start rhyming, I gotta have a second. You know, I was born in New York. I live in LA, but I'm an adopted son of North Carolina. I went to Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, and I have friends on the ground there that tell me it is rough. They tell me Samaritan's Purse was first in to help. Team Rubicon, I've made my donations, and I beg your listeners, whatever they can do to help those two organizations, or the Red Cross or whatever, they need help in North Carolina, and we need to help them more.
Well and timely said, Joe.
All right. And now to the business at hand. This country's getting buried in new conflicts and imbroglios, and all we have in Washington are egos with portfolios. The man who said 1 year ago, such hubris is a sin, the Middle East is quieter than it has ever been. The one who smugly stated that the $1 billion we sent, Iranians would only use for groceries and rent. The leader there at Commerce, who blinks when prices spikes, says without a thought that she's not focused on the strike. She's looking at the labor force, supply chain, and logistics, while unaware the BLS has published grim statistics. Buttigieg is on the job. Oh, how he likes to gloat. He has no plans to build a bridge and said he stewed the boat. And when it comes to hurricanes, I swear by all the powers, I think I want a president engaged beyond 2 hours. We can't return this retinue. Please tell me that we won't. My message to America is one resounding don't. That's We're in Trouble in River City by Tarzana Joe.
Oh, both literally and figuratively. I want to go back to where we began, Joe. Samaritan's Purse, Team Rubicon, Salvation Army, Red Cross, whatever your charity of choice is, our friends in North Carolina and in Eastern Tennessee, Northern Georgia, and very southwestern Virginia need your help. And it's very remote and very hard to get to. Thank you for bringing it to people's minds, Joe, and thank you for that poem, which will be at tarzanajoe.com for all your poetry need. Write to Joe at tarzanajoe@reagan.com. tarzanajoe@reagan.com. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Hugh.
You know, I am on the air in the Tri-Cities area out of Bristol, Tennessee, and my friends at Super Talk have been telling me what's going on down there, and it's so great a need. Just pick one of the groups. Team Rubicon, Samaritan's Purse, Salvation Army, they're all there. I'm sure Catholic Charities of each of those dioceses at work, and I know that the state agencies and the state National Guards are all working very hard. Not sure about FEMA. Doesn't help that Mayorkas says we've run out of money because we spent too much money on people who came across the border. That's not what you say. The president got off, the poor president, I don't know why he's president anymore. He got off the plane yesterday and said about North Carolina, cut number 46.
But folks, this entire project is going to cost billions of dollars, not tens of thousands, not millions, not a billion, billions of dollars, because it goes through so many states. And Congress has an obligation to me, it seems to me, to ensure the states have the resources they need.
Yeah, he's just absolutely clueless about what's going on. On Thursday night at the press gaggle, he said this, cut 47.
What do the states in the storm zone need, Mr. President?
Okay?
What do the states in the storm zone, what do they need after what you saw today?
Oh, in the storm zone?
Yes, sir.
I'm wondering what storm you're talking about. They're getting everything they need. They're very happy.
Yeah, they're not getting everything they need. It's just crazy. My friend Ricardo, who runs the driving range and Cuban hot dog stand in Miami, was up in Maine this week, and I took his wonderful wife out to lunch, and unfortunately we had to take Ricardo with me. And I was once again raving about the glories of St. Hugh of Lincoln, which was the parish I was using and attending Mass at during the November debate with NBC. It's a Cuban-American parish. It is alive and vibrant, and I love St. Hugh of Lincoln. They got a high school right there. So I was a little bit ambivalent or stunned to read in the Global Post this morning, and editor Philip Balboni joins me now. Philip, I had no idea that 850,000 Cubans had come to the United States since 2022. Can you unpack? Nobody knows that. I just don't think anybody knows that. It's the lead story in the globalpost.com this morning. Tell people about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's Hugh, it's a tragedy, a beautiful place, enterprising people. Their government is just driving them to despair. And, in fact, in the last 2 years, 1 million Cubans, that's 10% of the entire population of the country, have left, of which 850,000 have come to the United States, just, making our migration problem even worse. My favorite quote is from The Economist. One Havana resident told them, if this country had land borders, there would be nobody left. The economy is
Philip
just
Balboni, I tell everyone you got to read the Global Post every morning. Otherwise, you're going to be suffering from headline handicap. We're all focused on Israel, and we need to be. But I did not know anything about Cuba's violent crime epidemic. Everyone always said Cuba's safe and the health care is free, blah, blah, blah. Ben Rhodes flew down for Fidel's funeral. Well, it's a miserable place forever for political people, and now it's dangerous.
Dangerous gangs roaming the streets and people, afraid, being attacked. And their only option really is to leave. And, another one of the great ironies is that so Cuba's been a communist country since Fidel took over in the early 1960s. We all remember the story. And, but in all those years, more than 60 years, the country has not really advanced economically, particularly after the Soviet Union collapsed and the support that Russia, Soviet Union gave to Cuba pretty much dried up. And, you look at places like China or Vietnam, which have what's called state capitalism. You have middle class, you have wealthy people, you have private enterprise. Yes, it's all controlled by the government, but at least there's opportunity for people. Whereas in Cuba, they've done a little bit of economic liberalization, but very little. And 10% of the people in Cuba have no running water. I mean, they're importing sugar, which is they used to export to the world.
That's like coals to Newcastle. Phil Balboni, do they enjoy, I think the Cuban American community is so strong in the United States. I know a couple of second generation Cubans like Christina and Adita. They're longtime friends of friends and friends of mine. There's an extraordinary Cuban infrastructure in the country across the lower 48 and Hawaii and Alaska. Have these 850,000 emigrate? They have special status if they get out of Cuba and they get to the United States. Am I correct about that?
I believe that is right, that this is another legacy of our long history with Cuba, going back to the Bay of Pigs and all of that, that they do have special status. And unlike the Haitians, for example, not too far away, another island um, where they are not so fortunate.
But the Cuban infrastructure exists, and I saw it when we were down there for the Miami debate. I saw it at St. Hugh of Lincoln. I saw it throughout the entire community. It exists. Now, Philip Balboni, let's talk bigger picture about the mission of the Global Post. I do this once a month because I am a huge advocate for literacy about the world in our schools, and globalpost.com. Well, you tell them, Philip, that if you're a student or a teacher, you get it for free. I pay for it, but Philip makes it available for free for how many people now?
There's more than 10,000 students and teachers in all across the United States, 79 countries around the world, places like Yemen and Pakistan, Myanmar, places you'd never think that students would be signing up, but they are. It's really one of the most wonderful, important things we do. If you are listening and you would like a free subscription, you're a student or a teacher, just go to our website, globalpost.com. You'll see number 2 in the navigation. It says Global Education Initiatives. Just click on that. It will give you everything you need. Easy sign up for students. There's absolutely no cost to you. And here we're developing a study guide for teachers, which we're also going to be giving away for free. One for high schools, one for colleges, and it would also be good for homeschool students as well. So that is being worked on
what I
right
want to
now.
stress to the audience, if you're a social studies teacher, I don't care if you're teaching American government or world history or European history or an AP course, even if you're in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and you hand this out every morning, and you have your kids. I don't believe in devices in schools, but maybe they can print it off and hand it out. They'll know everything about the world. I mean, they will be conversant with the world when they get to college if they read globalpost.com 5 days a week for a year, Philip. They'll know just to put a globe in the front of the classroom and walk through the items. They'll be spinning it around and they'll learn.
And we have maps in the newsletter, so they don't even have to go to the globe spinning around. They can look right at the maps in the newsletter that give people the precise location of the country we're talking about, as we do with Cuba this morning.
Which other ones? You cover the very little island that Britain gave away today too. I can't remember the name of it. I read it, but I can't remember
the Chagos Islands, which is officially part of Mauritius. So these islands are important to actually the United States and the UK because we have a big air base there called Diego Garcia. And you may remember during the Vietnam War, B-52 bombers took off from Diego Garcia and flew a considerable distance to unfortunately bomb in Vietnam. Those bombers are still there, B-1s, B-2s, B-52s. And so this is an important location, even though it is truly in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the Indian Ocean. You'd be hard-pressed to find it on the map.
The map is so important for people to see in globalpost.com this morning. That transfer of sovereignty could have grave significance for the United States if China gets involved. Philip Balboni, as I say every month, I appreciate globalpost.com greatly. You're doing a great public service. And if you're a news junkie like me, it is really worth the subscription. Very, very inexpensive. And you'll be smarter every day that you read it. You'll know what's going on in the world. Philip Balboni, I appreciate your appearance as always. Talk to you next month.
Thank you, Hugh. All right. Thank you. Take care.
Always a pleasure. Follow him as well at P. Balboni on X. Let me tell you about My PhD Weight Loss, one of our great sponsors. Dwayne has been on vacation. That's in air quotes. He went back to the Beltway. Yeah, there it is, empty. And is that his brainwave? Is that his sleep pattern? If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you'll see Dwayne's empty office. He's not been on vacation. He's been back at Studio Beltway getting it ready. Yeah, you have to update all the equipment every year. The software is complicated, and I'm removing to Studio Beltway soon for the election and the election overtime, which, we might have a Florida 2000. It could be a 10-vote election in some of these states. It could be a 1-vote election. I really would not be surprised if one of these swing states is decided by 10 votes. And it's not beyond the realm of possibility that it's 1 vote, which is why I want you to go out and vote early. But Dwayne went back, and if you listened to Dwayne's World earlier this week, you'll have heard he also got someone, I'm not sure who, took him onto the House floor. They're out of session, and so he may have connected. My son James works for Michael Waltz, so maybe it was James. I don't know. I have no idea. But I do tell you this. We have got a great producer in Dwayne, and he's working around the clock even on his vacation. But you don't recognize him anymore because he's Skinny Dwayne because of myphdweightloss.com. 864-644-1900. Can't wait till Monday when I find out if he ate his way through D.C. There's a lot of good stuff to eat in D.C., right? There's just a lot of good. Delray and Alexandria, a lot of great restaurants there. We'll see how he chowed down and whether or not he went. When you lose 50 pounds, you aim to keep your weight between 50 and 40. Like I aim to keep my weight at 185. I lost 40 pounds during COVID just by walking and trundling every day. There was nothing else to do. I just listened to books. This was before podcasts really bloomed. So now I do show prep when I'm out trundling or walking. And Generalissimo probably walked the mall a lot, may have allowed himself a chance to have a snack or two. But he lost 50, went back to 45, got as high as 42. He's back down to 48. Why? Because their program is life-changing. It works. Give them a call, 864-644-1900. That's 864-644-1900. Also want to remind you, download the Salem News Channel app. We're going to have election night coverage. It's going to be terrific. You now know that legacy media is broken. Just absolutely broken. And CBS, NBC, it was my monologue. My monologue will be posted at hughhewitt.com before long. I posted over at X. I listened to 7 different podcast assessments. And I mean really smart. Megyn Kelly, Mary Catherine Ham, and I have all done debates. We've all done them. We know what the process is. But people like Josh Holmes and Comfortably Smug and Michael Duncan and John Ashbrook, Smug interviewed J.D. Vance last night. Can't wait to listen to that today. Find out how J.D. did with the fellas, as they say. And I am just convinced that people are giving up. There's no fixing CBS. There's no fixing ABC. NBC did a pretty good job at the Republican debate when I was involved. Not sure that it isn't subject to the same fatal flaw, which is epistemic closure. They really have no idea what the country thinks, and they have to manipulate every question. It was so bad. Margaret Brennan's reputation is scarred. It's just scarred. Just like David Muir, who I had no opinion of, and Lindsay Davis, who I'd never heard of, scarred. I just don't believe they have any idea what half the country thinks of that terrible, biased debate on Tuesday night that J.D. Vance nevertheless wiped Tim Walz with the floor with. And Governor Walz, maybe you ought to step aside. People now no longer believe anything you say. The only reason you got away with it for so long is because of the Minnesota media. Powerline blog wasn't there soon enough, but they are now, and they're all over it, as is Prop Harris Libertas, Chad the Elder, Mitch Berg, all the guys in the Northern Alliance. Sarah Bedford with the Washington Examiner joins me, and boy, it's timely. Sarah, good Friday to you. FEMA says it's out of money. Homeland Security Secretary says they're out of money. Joe Biden says Congress has to act. What's Congress going to do? Because the poor people of North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida deserve what everyone else deserves when a disaster strikes. But I can't believe that the DHS is out of money.
Yeah, that's been shocking to a lot of people that FEMA has run out of money. There's obviously been some scrutiny of other areas that FEMA has been spending its money in other than disaster relief. But so far, Congress doesn't seem inclined to rush back to Washington to pass a supplemental to get this money through. And so, I think it's sort of a waiting game at this point to see whether leadership, Speaker Mike Johnson, is going to call lawmakers back to Washington to get that money passed.
Why wouldn't Chuck Schumer get the ball rolling? Biden said they need the money. Kamala Harris said they need the money. It's up. Schumer's the majority leader. If he brings the Senate back, that Mike Johnson will bring the House back. But is Majority Leader Schumer doing anything?
So far, it doesn't seem like that anyone's in any rush, Schumer included. There's a lot of tight races out there. I think senators sort of had their eye, especially Democratic senators who are really on defense with the Senate map, had their eye on campaigning. And so, the lack of the sense of urgency on Capitol Hill has been pretty amazing to watch when you see the reports of the scope of the devastation. And I think it's going to get a lot worse as this death toll climbs, but you don't see that sense of urgency just quite yet.
I had Marsha Blackburn on the program from Tennessee. I see Tom Tillis trying to get people's attention up. The fact of the matter is, in fact, check me if you want, Sarah, there are 11 Democrats in trouble, one open seat and 10 incumbents. Those 10 incumbent Democrat senators don't want to go back to D.C. The House could get a quorum because there are enough safe House seats. What are there, 25 competitive races in the House, would you guess?
Give or take, yeah, that sounds about right.
So you could get most of the House back with a snap of your finger. It's the Senate that won't come back. It's the 10 Democrats who are telling Chuck, don't make us come back to D.C. to vote for FEMA because you spent all the money on illegal immigrants. They don't want that look, Sarah. Have you talked to any Democrats at all about this?
Nobody wants to talk about what FEMA has been doing with its budget. I mean, there's, these fact checks from corporate media about how, it's separate pools of money that FEMA had stuff appropriated for helping migrants arriving to the U.S. and they had money appropriated for disasters in their separate pots of money. But, money is fungible within these agencies, right? This is a constant funding argument that Republicans are making. And it's a really bad look for this administration and for Joe Biden, who frankly, in some clips that have come out over the past few days, doesn't seem to understand that there was even a storm in these states and highlights the lack of leadership in the White House right now. It's really not to make this political, but it's a really bad position for Democrats to be in 3-4 weeks before the election.
Yeah, Biden-Harris is failing far more than, President Obama went to New Jersey after Hurricane Sandy, hugged Chris Christie on the beach, won the election. Joe Biden stumbled through that thing. The guy is just too old. Does anyone in the newsroom argue the point that the president doesn't seem to be up to the job?
Certainly not in our newsroom. I think that's a point of frequent discussion, but in corporate newsrooms, I think that reporters are content to pretend that Joe Biden doesn't exist because he is a liability for Kamala Harris, and to acknowledge that he's unable to do the job is to acknowledge that Kamala Harris has covered that up and been part of this, what has been described as that conspiracy of silence around Joe Biden for all of these months. It cuts at her credibility as well. So I think the mainstream media would rather pretend that Biden doesn't exist right now.
Well, we will keep following you, Sarah C. Bedford, on X and at the Washington Examiner to find out whether or not Congress is summoned back to help the people of North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia, and Virginia. They ought to come back. Thank you, Sarah. Want to remind everyone the Hillsdale Dialogue is coming up, all things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Now, we switch it up in the last radio hour of every week, and we go very high. I'm going to talk with Professor O'Toole. I think it's part 9 of our discussion of the Republic. I want to encourage everyone to go and get this edition of the Republic. It's by Alan Bloom, 2nd edition, The Republic of Plato. And it's got some remarkably applicable sections to the morass we find ourselves in. But please also go over to my YouTube channel, Hugh Hewitt, and listen to the monologue this morning. Harley's going to get that posted. I just want you to know how bad the CBS debate was, how completely collapsed broadcast news has become. It's not news. It's just an arm of the DNC. Every question. If you listen to Megyn Kelly, it's R-rated. Comfortably Smug and Josh Holmes and Mike Duncan and John Ashbrook over at the Ruthless Podcast, R-rated. But Jim Garrity and Rich Lowry and the gang over at The Editors, or Rich Lowry talking with Andy McCarthy on the McCarthy Report, those are PG-13. Be careful what you listen to in the car with kids in the back with Megyn and with Ruthless. But for you grown-ups, go. The broadcast executives at CBS ought to get everyone who was involved in that debacle into a room and make them listen to all 10 hours of the 7 podcasts I list over on X, or go watch at Hugh Hewitt on YouTube.